Howdy guys, Bookie Laura here. Before I start, apologies for the terrible lighting. I'm having all new furniture and my house is a mess and I cannot find anywhere that I can film with decent lighting at the moment, so this is the best I can do. Anyway, I was recently lucky enough to receive a copy of Joe Spain's Sleeping Beauties from the publishers, so I thought I'd give you a review of it. The plot is basically that a young woman called Fiona goes missing, and then this is the story of the inspectors kind of trying to find out who done it and find the criminal and all what have you. Now what happens after she goes missing is shortly after that they discover a whole bunch of bodies, and then it becomes like a proper murder investigation rather than a kidnapping, which adds a whole extra spin on it. It follows in depth the sort of inspectors and police's investigation and their personal lives alongside that, which I felt was quite an interesting element. It was only part way through into reading it that I realised that actually this was part of a series of books, because there was something about the way it was talking about characters that I just thought it felt like I should have known all this stuff about them already, and I didn't. So I think that that for me was possibly something that detracted from me, but I can see if you were into the series already it wouldn't at all. But I wasn't invested in the characters, and when it talked about their personal lives and who they fancied and who they wanted to sleep with, I was a bit like, wow, that doesn't seem a necessary detail to me. However, I can see that if you're following the story arc of the characters, then it probably is very relevant detail. For me, it was a very sort of typical crime thriller. I enjoy a good crime thriller, and I'm lucky enough that I'm a complete idiot, so I don't tend to guess who done it and what have you, so I always enjoy discovering that and realising that the clues had been there right from the start. I, as I said before, didn't enjoy the lots of references to their personal lives, particularly in terms of love and affairs. I felt that it disrupted the plot when actually I just wanted to follow the investigation. But that's just a personal preference of mine. I enjoy crime thrillers, so I did enjoy reading this book. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, and there's a part of me that's tempted to read the rest of the series, but it might be quite weird to go back to the first book when I know where the characters kind of end up. So it might be that I sort of carry on reading from this point on. We'll see. I enjoyed that it was set in Ireland. I thought that added another element, because often you read books that are usually set in America, following the sort of American system of how these things work. Occasionally you might get an English one, but I really enjoyed reading the sort of references to Ireland, and Ireland's a beautiful place, and I think that that helped me to picture this sort of beautiful green scenery and what have you, which was cool. One thing, there was a point towards the end where I didn't predict who did it, because that was never going to happen, but I was able to predict that something was going to happen, and that was quite disappointing, because as I said before, I am not a good predictor. I don't tend to read between the lines. I take everything at face value, so I only really notice what the author wants me to notice. So the fact that I knew this stuff was going to happen meant it was probably more obvious than it should have been. But as I said, I gave this book 4 stars. I'm contemplating carrying on with the series, but I'm not sure whether the crime thriller thing I love, but I'm not sure whether it gets old quite fast, that actually if you read a lot of them they become very predictable, and you get to know all the tropes and predictability things, and whether that ruins it. But I might consider reading one of them in the future. If you enjoy a crime thriller, then you will enjoy this, and I think the particularly interesting element was that it was set in Ireland, which adds something to it. So that's my review of Sleeping Beauties by Joe Spain. Let me know if you've read it or if you've read something similar. In fact, I'd be really interested if you've read any other books in the series to see whether they spend an awful lot of time talking... whether or not they spend an awful lot of time talking about love, or whether it was just this one in particular. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.